Welcome to part 2 of our introduction to the samurai tale. So we left off on the Bushido. The next part of the Bushido is benevolence, which is to show love, affection, and sympathy towards others, but not weakness. Samurais were incredibly wary of showing weakness. They were supposed to be strong at all times. So, in order to show benevolence, you would show sympathy and love, but don't show too much, or crying would be considered a weakness, things like that. And the last one is politeness. You are always to treat others in a polite or proper manner so that you will be perceived as a welcoming and open person who is there to help others. The next part of our journey is the samurai's arms. So these are important because they fought with swords, lances, bows, arrows, and later guns. These are how the samurai are protecting their land and protecting their people. The long sword was called the katana, and this is the most frequently seen sword today. Most of you may have seen one in movies or know someone who has one. These were incredibly popular for their length and their ability to cut through things very quickly. The short sword is the wazikashi, and it is a good sword to look. A good sword took a long time to create and to be decorated. It would also be incredibly sharp. So imagine you hold out your sword straight out from you, and you throw a piece of paper in the air. When the piece of paper floated past the blade of your sword, it would be sliced in two. So this is very sharp equipment and incredibly deadly. Okay, the reason they wanted that is because when a samurai went to kill their opponent, it was considered dishonorable to take more than one try to kill them or to decapitate them in most cases. So you wanted a very sharp sword so that when you went to kill someone, it only took the one blow and you didn't have to try more than once to kill them. Okay, so that was very important to samurais. So some swords were thought to have superhuman powers because they were so sharp and deadly. They were considered holy or having superhuman powers of some sort. And few swords were given names. So you know how sometimes your parents might name their car. It's not like that. This is more of a very reverent attitude towards their swords, and they name them in order to show them respect. A sword could cut off an opponent's head in just one stroke. That was a very important part of the samurai sword code and their equipment. And a young samurai received their first sword at age 5. We will hear about this more as we talk about our main character in our book and his journey towards samurai. Sword training usually focused on speed and accuracy. They began training at 13 and kept training very vigorously until age 22. After 22, they would hone their skills between battles just to stay fresh, but the most learning happened between 13 and 22. Lances were used. That's the kind of thing that you usually see in a jousting match. It's not quite like that, but a long, straight lance could be used, and they were usually about 8 feet long, and then bows were usually about 7 feet long, so about taller than a normal human, so that they could have the most strength and accuracy. So this is a short sword that may have been used by a samurai at one time. So let's talk about their armor. It's very important to be able to combat ready. So much of their combat was hand to hand. That means you are physically fighting with someone face to face, which means it's very important to arm yourself appropriately. Helmets were made of iron and were very elaborate. It's often a sign of social status as how decorated your helmet was. Additionally, the brow was topped with a crest in the shape of horns, dragons, or fantastic creatures to scare people. Emblems identified the warrior or symbolized bravery and were meant to scare your enemies. Arm guards were made of small iron plates. Those are the giant shoulder pads we saw on the very first picture of a samurai, and they were supposed to protect your shoulders. Neck guard was made of iron plates and coated with a lacquer and laced together with silk. So that was supposed to be able to be moved when you turned your head, but we're still protecting your carotid artery, which is in your neck. And the lacquer helped it to stop rusting because remember, these people are wearing this armor during wintertime and summertime. So you're sweating or you're freezing cold. And so you don't want your iron to rust. And then metal plates protected the knees and lower legs so that if someone went for your legs, they wouldn't have a very hard time cutting them off. That's what a typical suit of armor would have looked like. And it's, as you can see, very elaborate and even has some gold on it. Continuing on, the body armor was made of iron plates that were tied together with silk or leather cords. This made them movable. And usually it weighed about 25 pounds. So you were carrying your own weight plus an extra 25 pounds before you had your sword. When it rained, the cords became soaked, making the armor weigh even more, and it was often very, very heavy. The dressing into battle gear was very hard. Sometimes it took more than one person to get them into their armor. And after putting on a kimono and loose pants and an outer jacket and pants, they had to put on their armor. So you have the added weight of extra clothes and armor. Okay, and that's another type of armor that you would have seen in a typical day. So let's talk about Japanese castles and their towns that surround them. So this is what a castle might have looked like. It's a very large house. The rich and powerful daimyos built them, and they were very beautiful. They were surrounded by high walls and moats. This is mostly for protection. They designed castles for protection, and they showed off the wealth and importance of the daimyo, and they were big because they housed the daimyo, his family, his servants, and much of his army. So a lot of people were living here. The castle itself also served as political and economic centers of all the land that this particular daimyo owned. So it was the big marketplace as well as the government center, etc. The security in these towns were mostly built on high hills, so it was hard to get to. You could also always look down on your enemies. There were moats that were the first line of defense, so people would have to swim across the moat to even get to the tall hill to climb up to the castle. Outer and inner stone walls helped stop intruders. People could stand on the walls and pour down hot liquid or shoot arrows down onto their intruders. And then inner stone walls had hidden holes and trap doors that were used for dropping heavy rocks or boiling liquid down onto their enemies. All the walls were barred, and samurai shot arrows and guns through the slits in the walls to protect their town. Samurai stood watch at the gatehouse and watchtower and patrolled the area frequently. So no one was going to get in these towns. The keep was the highest part of the castle. That's where the daimyo and his family lived. And only few castles survived today. Most of them were battle-torn or were ripped down to make new housing. So that's another type of castle that would have survived till today. And that is the end of our part 2. Thank you for watching.